the outdoor program, and today we're going to talk about casting and just a little bit about fly fishing. So here's your fly rod and your reel. So when you put together your fly rod, you want to make sure all the loops are on the bottom and not on the top, and then you're going to put your reel on, which is right here, and make sure that the line is coming from the underside of it and not from the top side. And then once you've thread all the line through all the loops, you can pull it all the way through. You're going to have your line here, and that's usually like a vita color like this green, and that's what you're going to tie on. You're going to have leader and tippet connected to that. So your leader here, it actually tapers, so it's going to be thicker at the top where you tie it into the line, and then it's going to get thinner and thinner as you come down. And that's just to help with the presentation on the river. And then on the leader, you're going to tie on tippet, and that's just consistently thin. And the reason why it's consistently thin is when you're constantly breaking off flies or have to retie it. If you were only using the leader, then you would just get thicker and thicker, but the tippet would keep it thin.
Hi everyone, my name is Steven and I'm a field instructor at the University of Wyoming's outdoor program. I'm going to be touching on which fly rod you should use and why you should use it around here in Wyoming. So here we have a 5-weight fly rod. Around here, that's very normal, very great for trout. It's very versatile as well. Rod weights will go anywhere from 2 to 12 weights. 2 is going to be the smallest, so that's going to be for real tight streams, small streams where the fish don't get very big. 12 is going to be the largest, and we use those for salt water. So you're not going to need any 12 weights around here in Wyoming. So what we look for trout is roughly 5 to 6 weight for rivers as big as the North Platte. If you're fishing smaller streams, you can go a 3 or 4 weight, and they will cast very well as well. The biggest thing we want to do is be able to fight the fish in a way to get it as quickly as possible, but also to put a little bit of bend in the rod. So like this 5-weight will be good for fish up to low 20 inches, and 6-weight will probably be fish up to about 25 inches and so on. So yeah, that's what we will use for rods. Alright, so now we're going to be touching on what flies you should use when you're fly fishing. Flies have 2 general categories. One is a wet fly and one is a dry fly. Their names are pretty self-explanatory. A wet fly is going to sink and it's going to be subsurface in the water column, whereas a dry fly is going to float and you'll actually be able to see the fish come up and take that fly. So I'm going to start with wet flies here. The first type of wet fly we have is called a nymph, and nymphs are going to imitate bugs that are in the water that haven't hatched into their adult form yet. So general life cycle of a bug. The adults, which are what you see flying around, let's say mosquitoes for example, they fly around and then they reproduce, lay their eggs on the water, which then fall into the water, and then those eggs hatch into the larvae. And this larval form is what a nymph is, and that's what we're going to be imitating subsurface. They can be pretty much any size, anywhere from half the size of your fingernail to, I don't know, maybe even the size of your finger. And you can see that here. We have a lot of midge patterns here, very small. Then they get a little bit bigger. We have some scuds, which are freshwater shrimp. And then we get into our mayfly imitations, get some pheasant tails, some hare's ears. There's all sorts of different patterns you can use. Patterns that are great to start with if you're just getting into it. Zebra midges are awesome. You can fish them year-round. They're really great to have. Pheasant tails are another great one to have. You can also fish those year-round. All of these you can fish at any time of the year, and they're very effective. So it's great to learn on these. On this side we have some larger nymphs. It's great for a lead attractor fly if you're fishing a 2-fly setup, and they also get down a little bit further in the water column, so those are great to have. Once again, those are all nymphs. They imitate bugs that are in the water. The next type of wet fly we have is streamers, and these will imitate bait fish that are in the water. Trout, about 90% of what they eat is going to be underwater. A lot of times that is nymphs, but if they're feeling aggressive or territorial or just very hungry and need protein, they can eat other fish. So here's an example of a streamer. Some of them are real big and daunty looking like that. They're articulated, they have 2 hooks like that. It just imitates like a small trout in the water, for example. Others, they won't be quite as big, but they still imitate little fish that are scurrying about. This is a bunny leech. Very effective fly, catches a lot of species of fish. So that's a general rundown of streamers. And finally, our last type of fly is a dry fly. And dry flies, once again, they float on the water and the fish will eat them off the surface. So there's multiple types of those as well. Some will imitate those bugs that hatch out of the water. Some will imitate grasshoppers or beetles or anything that falls into water. Those are called terrestrials. But great ones to have are elk hair caddises. Here's kind of an example of one of those. They have a big wing there and they float on the water. And that's great because you can see them the whole way, easy to see a fish take them. For hopper patterns, we have a chubby Chernobyl here. Those are really fun to fish in the summer. Fish will often go crazy for those. So once again, kind of big, daunty, leggy looking things, but they're very effective. So those are fun. And then there's also multiple kinds of small ones. Griffiths, gnats, trichos, parachute atoms. You can fish these multiple times a year as well, and they're fun to fish. It's one of my favorite ways to fish them. So yeah, those were the types of flies that we have, and once again, if you're starting to get into fly fishing, I would get zebra midges, pheasant tails, elk hair caddises, woolly buggers, and call it good.
Alright, so I'm going to teach you guys a little bit how to cast. So when you cast, you're going to pull out some of your line like it is now, and then you're going to hold part of the line kind of where this cork is, like I have it here. And then you'll be able to see that. And that's just to keep the line there so you know in case you catch a fish or whatever, your line's not going all everywhere out and about. And then once you're ready to cast, you kind of want to stay in the 10 to 2 position when you're casting. So you're going to go back, follow it, and then put it forward. Kind of pause for a second and then go back forward. One important thing is you don't want your wrist going everywhere or your forearm going everywhere, so kind of keep it just in line with the rod here. So back and then forward again, like that. And then when you need some more line, you can pull it out with your left hand here. And then when you're ready to get some more line, it kind of will just go out with it. Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to touch on roll casting here. A lot of people when they start fly fishing, they'll see these videos of people just whipping out line, really going as far as they can. Luckily we don't have to do that. That's a little bit hard to learn, and as you fly fish you can get there, and it is good to know how to do that. But one thing I love to teach people when they're starting is how to roll cast. So what we're going to do for a roll cast is we're going to take out about 10 feet of line, nothing too much to get started. So we have about that much line out there. All we'll do is we'll have the line roughly at our feet here, and if we're casting upstream in the river, let's say the river is coming at us from that direction to me, all we're going to do is hold the rod. If this were a clock, this would be 12 o'clock. Right here would be 1 o'clock. We're going to hold it at 1 o'clock, and we're just going to point the rod where we want it to go, keeping that wrist tight. Just point the rod where you want it to go. So with the wrist tight, 1 o'clock, we're going to go forward, and then that'll just float on down there. It'll drift back to you, and then what you're going to do, if you see a fish take it, you'll set the hook like that. If there's not a fish on it, you can just recast, and we'll do that over and over